our panel talking all about interview skills, some tips to have, what skills you should have in startup world. So I'm going to let our speakers come on up. I'm going to get them to unmute their mic. We have the incredible David Kofod from VMware, and we also have Anna Reaves from that startup show. So guys, welcome. Thanks so much for coming today. Feel free to maybe, we'll start with Dave because we did catch up with Anna a little earlier. But David, do you want to just tell the audience a little bit more about you, what you do over there at VMware?
Sure. Okay. Well, at VMware, we have a fairly broad range of products, but essentially everything that the internet sits on top of, we build. So server virtualization, all the way up to device management as well. So companies that have a large fleet of mobile phones and laptops, for example, if they want to manage all of those and have those securely connecting back to whatever resources people need to do their job, we do that in an automated fashion. So you can buy a machine off the shelf. 20 minutes later, you're using it for work.
And we have Anna Reaves. I'm just so happy to have you because we haven't had as many female founders today, but for those who don't know, and I'm sure many of you probably know her face and know exactly who this is, she is the founder of That Startup Show, which is an incredible series, and you can find that on Amazon Prime. But I will let Anna do her introduction and tell us how she fell into or got into what she's doing today. So Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Jess. And hi, Dave. Great to see you. Yeah, we definitely fell into it. It was definitely an accidental startup, That Startup Show. And for those who don't know, it's an online TV show about startup culture, future technology, innovation, and everything in between, startup life in between. It's hosted by Benjamin Law, who is quite well known. He's a bit of a culture commentator, but also has a bit of a geek side to him. And also Ray Johnson, who's also a really esteemed journalist in STEM. She works anchors at NITV as well, and she does a whole host of incredible things in the tech world and is an amazing mentor to a lot of Indigenous and First Nations Australian entrepreneurs as well. So there's we have two fabulous hosts.
What do you think are the key skills that lead to success either as a founder and then as an employee in startup world? Like, how is it different to corporate? And I know, you've got the pros and cons of both, but maybe Dave, if you want to take it, and then we can pass to Anna.
Sure. Look, I learned this lesson the hard way. Moderated enthusiasm. I think it's very easy to get carried away with an idea that you love. That doesn't necessarily translate into commercial success. You need to be very measured in what you do and how you approach it, and make sure that you are going to get the customers that you need at the other end of all the hard work that you're about to put in. It's great to be passionate, and you need that passion, but you just need to be smart about how you use that energy.
What do you think, Anna? I mean, you're so embedded in this startup community. Like, if you had some words of encouragement to people to get into this, what would they be? And like, what do you tend to think creates the most success in someone in the startup world as an employee or as a founder? What are your thoughts?
I definitely think you have to have the passion as a baseline. I know that, as Dave said, yes, it's measured, and when you actually go to execute, you've got to you've got to have certain sort of a discernment with when you do that. But I do think there is there's some greatness in creating a team together. You really can't do this on your own. You absolutely have to have complementary skills 100%. And there's that old adage in the startup world of you've got to have a hacker, hustler, hipster. But there's also one that people don't realize that you need, and this is the one that I like to add. It's the humanitarian. You actually need 4 of those skills, because the humanitarian is someone who also brings the humanness into this. Because I think founding teams, there are, as we've all know, startup culture can be very demanding. It is not easy to try and get something off the ground from scratch. It will demand a hell of a lot of your emotional, mental, physical, financial, all the resources. So if you need someone in that team to also look out for that side, and you also need someone to do that and be responsible for the culture you're creating from day one. So I think in terms of founders, you need to have complementary skills, and you need to be one of those skills. You may be a combination of them, Like you may be a bit of a hipster, i.e. designer, and a hustler, someone who's more of a marketer, kind of get out there and sell. You might have a combo of that. You might have more hipster than hustler, or you might have more hacker with hipster. But you absolutely need to have the skill set in the group of people if you're going to really make it. And they're the teams that often will go the distance as well, with the humanitarian thrown in.
Out of curiosity, I suppose if we had to like weigh up the pros and cons of working in a startup, something for people to really like legitimately consider, what would they be?
I can take that because I've very recently had to do that.
Whoa, I love it.
So,
Go.
so look, there's nothing more gratifying than creating something from scratch and seeing it thrive, seeing it prosper. But there is also nothing more heart-wrenching than going through a period of a quiet time where your whole life is on the line. There's a lot to consider. For me and for my family, it just made more sense to join a company where I can still do really well, but I know that because of the size of the organization, they've got customers knocking down the door, whereas I was constantly looking for more.
There's definitely different pros and cons at different stages of startup. So early stage startups, the pros are that, there's a lot of variety, flexibility, it's always dynamic, there's that sort of rush of just you're building the culture. The team's really excited because they're getting somewhere. You have your first big win, big contract. That's all very exciting and very positive and reinforcing. The cons of the early stage startup life is more around uncertainty. And then it's just really the roller coaster ride of sort of like cash flow coming and like up and down, investment, keeping the thing alive. When it gets to startup scale-ups, which is a different level of startup, it still has the startup mindset. So it still has that energy. Like I'm sure, Dave, you still have that in your company. You've scaled up, you've got systems in place. At that stage, it's a totally different set of challenges. Probably more around almost similar to the early stage startup, but on a bigger scale. So you've got more to lose, for example. The challenges are you have to grow and grow quickly and keep growing to basically keep the engine moving as well.
Yeah. It's you really touched on some of the most important issues. Like, I guess from a perspective, I know all of these experiences, right? And it's so cool as well, Dave, that you can give that insight into the both. And you can actually do both, by the way. You don't need to pick one or the other. You can actually change your career several times throughout your life.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
That you can do that at any point that you like, to try something different. And one thing that really resonated is making sure you've got the right team, but as well, like similar to how you mentioned, don't put all your eggs in the one basket with your clients. Don't want to do the same thing with your staff because, at the end of the day, they are staff too. And sometimes if you have a staff member that might be, looking after a certain part of your business, you need to make sure you're on top of what they've been doing. And so that you can kind of transition that and obviously have that knowledge transfer for someone else to take over that role. Well, just don't rely and count too much on like somebody, because that's what I've learned from a company that we've grown from 5 people to over 100. It sort of makes me think, like you have people coming, you have people going. It's just like this circle of life. And I think it's one thing I say to any founder out there, if you've got like your first, one of your early stage employees or whatever, and they're wanting to leave, do not freak out too much. It's not the end of the world. You can find other people it might even be better for you, right? So that's one thing that's really important to consider and keep in mind. How do you pick a company culture? Like, because you've picked VMware, which is an amazing brand, but like, how do you go about that process to consider a culture? And then as well, maybe Anna, how do you create a really welcoming culture to make people want to pick you?
Well, I think when a lot of people that join a startup, they're looking to achieve a particular thing. They're somebody that wants to solve a problem, kick a goal, and have a big win. And in my case, here's something I prepared earlier. I built the Sophie Hub, right? So, and that was the whole idea that I joined Sophie Hub, because I wanted to build this machine. I thought, how cool is that? I can create a machine that thousands of people use one day, and it's my contribution to society and humanity and what have you. And once I'd done that, there wasn't a lot of challenge left for me. It all sort of felt a bit like hard work. I'm terribly sorry, Ian. It's true, but it did. Great company, and fantastic product. But for me, that was the achievement. Like, that was the thing that I wanted to do. And when I climbed that mountain, standing at the top of the mountain, you're like, well, I can stick on the top of the mountain, or I can, walk down there and do something else. And for me, I kind of thought, VMware was their products were so great, and I was such a VMware fanboy. And I know it sounds daggy, but honestly, that
They are.
I
They
couldn't
are.
I couldn't have done I couldn't have built my business without the tools that they provided. ESXi back in the day to do virtualization, so I could have multiple servers on one piece of steel, which is old hat now, but back then, I
Mm.
mean, that was like, that was huge. Without that, I wouldn't have gotten where I got. And so ever since then, I thought, well, why don't I work for that company? Why don't I work for these guys that are I'm so enamored of? That they've done they've created such great things. And so that's why I went forward and joined them. It's almost a by the by that the culture is so great.
What would be one top tip you would give someone, and one thing that you're looking for when you do have an interview with a candidate, maybe starting with you, Dave? What do you look for when you're screening somebody, and what kind of advice could you give to somebody who's looking to come and work at VMware?
I'm pretty old school, right? So I mean, there's so many great candidates, and so many people that reach a certain bar of ability and education, etc., all that sort of stuff. And personally, I don't think education is that important. I think the ability to do the job and the desire to do the job is important. But personal presentation, right? If you dirty shoes, that bothers me. If you've got dirty shoes, don't bother coming,
If you go
right?
over an interview over a
No,
weekend, maybe
I'm serious. I'm
dirty
serious.
shoes.
If you don't take the time to, because everybody is selling, regardless of what you think. No matter what your job is, you're selling. You're part of the company. You're part of how that company presents itself. You better make sure that everything that you do presents the company in the light that the company wants to be presented in. And if you don't even have the nous to have the effort to present yourself in the right way in an interview, I'm afraid that's a red flag straight away. And another thing too, most interviews these days are conducted by a video conference. How much thought have you put into your video conferencing setup? I mean, I'm talking to you right now on my Zoom setup, and I'm not directing
Yeah,
that
look at
question
his.
at
The
anybody.
last
And,
night he
and,
showed
and yours
me.
is fantastic, obviously.
I'm in the
But
studio.
if you I'm sitting in a setup that cost me less than $300, right? That cost me less than my suit. If you're going to spend more on your suit to sit in front of a camera that you pulled out of your drawer that you had from the 90s, you could do better.
But Anna, in closing, as well, give us some of your tips and what you look for in a candidate. Whenever you go for an interview with somebody, what do you tend to look for?
I think there's obviously, when people say authenticity, that's important. It's a genuine, you're looking for that genuine, why do you want to be here? Like, why do you want to be in this industry? Why do I like people when they're really honest about their aspirations as well. Like, I know that our company might be a stepping stone to a bigger vision, but I want to know that as well. And I think it's also important that they're honest about their values as well, and the values match the kind of actions. And I think that comes from things like, social media as well. Like, sometimes, if someone's saying, they care about people, but you look on their social media and they're making nasty comments, that doesn't quite match up. Like, it's really important in this day and age, to be a good person, to have respect for people, have respectful relationships. We've seen huge things that have happened from Me Too. All of those things, employers are very, very conscious of who you are, online and offline. And because that's a risk for a company, like if those sort of things aren't aligned. And so that is huge, huge as well. But the final thing I also look for is just beautiful curiosity and imagination. I love people who are curious and just, hungry and just want to learn. And that makes me excited, because I want to know where their mind is going to take us. Obviously, we're in a creative industry, so that's incredibly valuable. But I just love that sort of like spirit of someone who brings a little curiosity and joy and imagination to work every day.
I love that. I mean, this panel's been incredible. I've really got to say, you've given some awesome tips, the corporate versus startup, what you look for. I'm just so grateful. So I know we're out of time, we're over time. In fact, we probably might not have as much time for our break, but we will go to break. So I've got to say, thanks so much, David. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jess.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.